struggling with getting your bananas to actually produce, I have got several tips that are going to get you growing lots of bananas super fast. We moved into this homestead a little over 3 years ago, and we got our bananas in the ground maybe 2.5 years ago. We have already harvested 3 racks of bananas off our 3 plants, and we have 2 more about to produce for us again. If you give bananas what they need, they will produce bananas for you every year. The 3 things that you need for bananas are sun, fertilizer, and water. Without one of those components, you are going to have slow or no production. Our family loves bananas, so they needed to be a key part of our landscape design here. I chose prime real estate for them, where they're going to get ample amounts of sunlight throughout the day. They get at least 8 hours of sunlight. Even in the winter months, they're getting consistent sun. If you put them in part shade, they will not do as well for you. It is going to take longer for them to fruit, and they are going to be slower growing. If you put them in dense shade, they may not grow for you at all. When you are trying to give your bananas fertilizer, this can be in the form of homemade compost. It can be collecting manure from a nearby farm or stable. Maybe you have backyard chickens. It really needs a consistent high volume fertilizer. Throwing a couple of banana peels or some coffee grounds on it isn't going to cut it. If you want consistent production, you're going to need to give them some sort of regular supplemental fertilizer. I give mine a nice helping of compost twice a year, usually spring and fall, but not always on time on that. The other really important resource for them is water. Now, in our summer months, we get ample rain to make sure that they are well watered, and you do not need to worry about supplemental watering. But if you want consistent production in our dry times, if it's been more than a week or so, if you give them a nice healthy drinking of water, they are going to grow much faster for you. We do have a little bubbler that's placed next to each banana circle, and that is run with the well in the garden. So they do get consistent water year round because of that. If I did not have our yard set up on an automated system, once a week should be fine. So here's a quick rundown on how I decided to set up our bananas to conserve water, give them ample fertilizer, and allow that light in. We basically created a mini forest here. So I have lots and lots of organic matter, which is wood chips, around the bottom that helps to maintain moisture and keep things in the system as long as possible. I also put in a lot of other plants. We have lemongrass, we have papaya, we have all sorts of native wildflowers. And when I plant all of this together as a unit, it's creating a little mini microclimate. It's creating more humidity, it is creating more leaf drop to add nutrients and organic matter. Kind of helps to round out the system with less inputs from you. Bananas, in my opinion, are not terribly maintenance heavy, but they're not a breeze either. They do need some care and upkeep to keep them looking good and to also make sure that they're producing consistently for you. They will drop yellow leaves throughout the year. If you allow them to stay on the plant, it can make it look a little rough. So if this is part of your home and garden where you frequent, you're probably going to need to clean these up once a month or so, going around trimming out the yellow leaves. One tip though is to not throw those leaves out. Simply drop them in and around your bananas. It's a living, decomposing mulch, and it will add not only fertility but maintain moisture within the system. So don't just throw them out, give them back to the bananas that grew it. The hardest part, or the most physical labor aspect of bananas, is removing extra pups. A pup is the baby banana that comes off of the mother tree. So when you plant your banana, you're going to have one tree. Actually, it's not a tree, it's a grass, but that's besides the point. and it's going to eventually produce pups, which are its babies, around the base of the mother tree. If you allow the mother tree to produce pups without removing any, she is then having to divert all of her energy and resources to those pups. If we simply remove some of those pups from around the mother tree, she's not having to divert as much of her resources into those babies, and then she's able to produce a rack of bananas for you much quicker. At most, you should have 2 or 3 pups on any one mother tree. Sometimes they could put out 10 pups, which means you're going to have to go through with a sharp shovel and remove those extra pups to allow the mother to get the bananas produced for you. If you wait until they're about 2 foot tall, they should survive being severed from the mother plant, and you can then transplant it elsewhere, give it to a neighbor, or potentially even sell that pup. So 2 feet or more if you'd like for it to live. If you want it to be a little bit easier physical labor wise, you can take them while they're still young. It just won't likely survive. So when is it time to harvest the bananas, and how do you do it? Everybody has their own approach to it, but when they are at this stage where they're just developing, some people will cut the flower off and others leave it. There's no right or wrong. The bananas will still ripen either way, but they do tend to ripen faster if you cut the flower, which is what I do. So if you do decide to cut off the flower, what I usually do is wait for several of the hands or petals to fall off without forming any bananas. When you get anywhere between 3 to 5 inches below where your bananas formed, where you haven't gotten any more production, that means that the tree is done. That's as big as your rack's going to get, and leaving the flower on longer isn't necessarily going to change that. So once I get 3 to 5 inches below where the bananas have actually formed, I cut the flower off. Now the flower is edible, and there are different preparation methods depending on your culture and the use that you're seeking, but it doesn't have to go to waste if you don't want it to. You can also compost it if you're not interested in cooking it. To get them to ripen is several months. We get so excited when they first form and we're ready for our bananas, and then a lot of people think there's something wrong or that they need to do something for the tree because the bananas aren't ripening. This process takes several months, and if it started ripening right before fall and you're heading into winter, it may not ripen until the following spring, which is so frustrating to have to wait through, but it is what it is. There's no way to speed this process up. How do you know when the bananas are actually ready? You can wait for them to start ripening on the tree. Some people will bag the bananas, and that helps all of the bananas to ripen at the same exact time. So it basically traps a gas that the bananas put off, and by that gas getting trapped in there with the plastic bag, it ripens all of the bananas all at once. For us, for personal consumption on a small scale, we would rather have them ripen slowly because we want to be able to eat as many bananas fresh as possible. When the bananas are very plump, they don't have distinct ridges on the bananas, or when you start to see a couple of them coloring yellow, you can go ahead and cut the rack off of the tree. You can do this with loppers or any other sharp knife to cut it from the tree. And then what I do is I just hang it in our shed. It can be hung in the house, it can be hung in a garage. You basically just want to suspend it in the air and they will slowly continue to ripen from that point. You will hit a tipping point eventually where all of them decide it's time, and once that happens, I'll usually just process and freeze them. But it does allow things to ripen a little bit slower when you cut them off of the tree before the whole rack has turned yellow. That when the mother tree produces a rack of bananas for you, it dies. At that point, it's already produced pups to replace itself for future generations of bananas, but that original tree is done. There is no saving it. There is nothing you can do to prolong or keep that banana around. You probably don't want to leave it to rot in place just because if it's in a home setting or whatnot, it could fall over at any point. We remove ours once the bananas have been harvested, which means having something sharp to cut the banana off with at the base. The very bottom part of it will eventually rot away and turn into nothing, and the pups that have formed around it will then take the place of that mother plant. If you're concerned about planting bananas from the maintenance aspect and you're maybe not comfortable on a ladder or something to get up to the leaves or to harvest the rack of bananas, they do have true dwarf varieties. This banana tree that I'm standing next to is full grown and will produce a nice sized rack of bananas within probably the next couple of months. So if you're concerned about being up high or maintenance wise, do know that there are options for you that will bring it down to your level. In just 65 square feet of space, we have 3 banana trees growing. These 3 bananas are able to completely meet the needs of my family of 4. When we get a fresh rack of bananas, we eat as much as we can, and then we freeze the rest. We use them in smoothies, we have them pre-sliced to put on toast for a quick, easy breakfast in the morning. Very easy to preserve and so incredibly productive. If you want to see 7 fast-fruiting fruit trees to plant in your urban landscape, make sure to check out this video next.